Good afternoon. I had no idea they'd play the video or I wouldn't have worn the same clothes. I have one standard outfit. What do you do? How many of you know a child or youth? Please stand up. If you know one child or one teenager, please stand up. Oh, there are a few people standing. I'm really glad to see that. Okay, you can sit down. And let me introduce myself. I'm Debra Pepler. I'm a mother of 3 adult children, one of whom has a birthday party today. I am a new grandmother, and I'm a child psychologist. And you're just the people that I want to talk to. You might be thinking, I should listen to her. She's probably got the secret. She probably knows all about parenting. Well, let me assure you, I do. I know all of the mistakes that parents can make, and I figured that out as soon as I made them. So I bring both practical experience and research experience to our discussion today. Raising healthy children isn't rocket science. Since the beginning of humanity, people have figured out how to raise healthy children, or children wouldn't have survived and we wouldn't be here. So this isn't something new. But about 70 years ago, Dr. Renee Spitz spent time in an orphanage and discovered that raising healthy children is much more than basic caretaking and feeding. In fact, children cannot survive unless they grow up in healthy relationships. So what I hope today is that when I've finished, you'll not only know how to raise a healthy child, but you'll know why this is so important. And you'll reach out to the children and youth in your lives. Why is this important today? Well, children and youth are growing up in such a different world than I grew up in, and probably than you grew up in. They're living in a deeply digital world. I was so surprised to learn that youth interact with each other more through electronic means than face-to-face. And it's not just young people. It's families too. Have you seen a family in a restaurant lately? Parents on their cell phones, the children on their devices, and nobody's talking to one another? Have you seen playgrounds? The children are playing and the parents are at the sidelines reading email and texting. Our children need us to be deeply, deeply connected to them. So, how do we raise healthy children? What are the ingredients for this? It actually takes 2 things: love and guidance. Love helps children develop, feel valued, feel accepted, safe, trusting, and then they can move out into the world and learn the things we want them to know. Guidance helps children learn to regulate their emotions and behaviors, and by doing that, it changes their brain, and as their brain changes, then they're able to learn the things that we want them to learn, both academic and social emotional. Well, let's take a look at how we're doing in Canada on child development. So I'm not sure where to point this. Oh. All right, great. Recent UNICEF report on the well-being of children in developed countries. Look where we stand, pretty good. 2nd out of 28 countries. Most of our children are doing really well on reading and math and science knowledge. Let's take a look at relationships. Where are we? We're at the bottom. 25th out of 28 countries. Our youth report having less positive relationships with their parents and their peers than children in almost all of the other developed countries. So our job is to change the gap between our educational performance, which is so good, and ensure that our children are growing up in healthy relationships, which is what they need today. I've spent most of my career studying troubled children and what goes wrong for children who are aggressive and have difficulties. And I've helped others develop programs so that these children can get onto a healthier pathway. I've had an opportunity to put a microphone like this on children and ask them to go about as they normally would on the school playground. And so I've stepped into a child's world, and I've come to understand not only how difficult it is for these children to interact positively with others, but how others don't interact positively with them. The other thing that I've really learned is about their parents. And what I've learned is that their parents desperately want to be the best parents for their children that they can be. But they have a mountain of challenges: financial burdens, living with family violence, mental health problems. And these burdens prevent them from parenting effectively. So children grow up in a chaotic home environment where there's inconsistent love, a lack of good guidance, so their brains don't develop the way we need them to regulate and be healthy. And then they move out onto the playground and they try to find some control, try to find some attention. And what they do is use aggression to make that happen. Like this little boy. So what can we do to change things for these children? Well, let's just take a look for a minute at what's happening under the skin. There's new research that's coming out to help us understand what's really happening for aggressive children, like this boy that I'm showing you. Michael Meany from McGill and his colleagues have done research on rats. You can't do this kind of research on children. And they take rat pups who have a gene that predisposes them to be highly anxious and reactive. And then they cross-foster that rat and put it with a mom that's nurturant, highly nurturant. And what happens is those genes modify and they don't express themselves. However, if another pup from that litter is raised by a low-nurturing mom, those anxious genes don't get modified. They become highly anxious, highly reactive, and often aggressive. So parenting affects the way genes are expressed. There's some other research helping us understand what stressful relationships look like and how they impact children and youth. A study done in the UK looked at children who'd been exposed to violence in relationships, child abuse, witnessing interparental violence, or being maltreated. The children who had experienced being frequently victimized is the third one. The children who had experienced 2 out of 3 of those forms of stressful relationships had a shortening of their DNA between the ages of 5 and 10 that's related to aging. So the effect of relationships goes right down to the genes. How long does this last? Is this just temporary? Well, another study in the United States called the ACEs study asked adults about their childhood experiences. And they identified a whole range of what they called adverse childhood experiences. These are things like being abused, living with a parent who has a mental health problem, a parent who's been in prison, all things that would affect the quality of children's relationships. And what they found is adults who lived with 4 or more of these adverse experiences in childhood had high risk for chronic physical and mental health problems. So they were at risk for so many problems later in adulthood because of what had happened in childhood. So the effects of living in stressful relationships not only affect children's behaviors, they affect their brains, they affect their genes, they affect their immunity, their very capacity for healthy living. But it's not let's turn to being bullied, because that's what I deal with. That's my research at the moment. How are we doing in Canada around preventing bullying? Well, let's have a look. Again, with this UNICEF report, we're at the bottom third of countries for preventing bullying among our children. 1 in every 3 youth who responded to this World Health Organization survey said that he or she had been victimized at least once in the past couple of months. What does this mean for children? Well, some research by Tracy Vinecourt in Ottawa has looked at this and looked at how these children's brains respond. And children who've been frequently victimized respond by having high levels of the stress hormone in their brain. That stress hormone affects their mental health, and that in turn affects their memory. So these children are at high risk for having learning problems and not doing well on the educational attainment that we would wish for them. So the effects are really deep in terms of stressful relationships and what happens to children. So what should we do? What can we do to change this? Well, a turning point in my thinking came when I had an opportunity to speak to an Inuit elder. And my question to him was, what's different about the way you raise children in your traditional ways and the way we raise children in our Western ways? And he looked at me, shook his head and said, there are big differences. He said, but the biggest difference is that we honor children's mistakes. And by honoring children's mistakes, it gives us the very best opportunity to step in and help that child in a relevant way in the moment. In thinking about his response to me, I realized he was talking about guidance, of course, that we need to support children to learn the things that they need to learn. But he was also talking about love. Because when you honor a child's mistakes, you respect that child for the mistakes that he or she makes, and you maintain a caring relationship because the child doesn't feel shame and doesn't feel as if you don't value them. This reminds me of what a student, a high school student, said to me last year, and it was that school needs to be a place where we can learn to be human. Well, the good news is that this is research out of the SNAP program. There's lots that we can do to help children develop. This program deals with children and their parents and teaches the children how to regulate their emotions and behaviors, and also teaches their parents how to help their children learn social skills and develop competently. And what Mark Lewis and his colleagues found in the study that we were doing was that the emotional areas of the children's brains were less activated after treatment than before, and the logical thinking areas of their brain were more active after treatment than before if they'd improved in behavior. So where do we go from here? There are possibilities for change. Children need love and guidance. And growing up in today's world, they need the support of all of those around them. The support of their parents and their grandparents, but also the support of their aunts and their uncles and their teachers and their coaches and their neighbors. All of these people are important. So there's an old saying, it takes a network, or it takes a village to raise a child, and maybe in today's world it takes a network. We've had an amazing opportunity to develop a network of 110 researchers now, 56 national youth-serving organizations. And we've come together to promote healthy relationships and prevent the stressful relationships, such as those in bullying. We've been working with Canadian Red Cross, Kids Help Phone, Big Brothers Big Sisters, Facebook, to build resources, bridge the gap between our science and the knowledge and practice to ensure that all the children in Canada grow up in safe and healthy relationships to promote their healthy development. So put your hands up again if you know a child or a youth. Yeah, okay. There are more people now than before. That's fantastic. So let me take my message to you. What can you do to help the children and youth in your world? First, show them that you care. Have fun with them. Show them that you enjoy being with them and they're valued. Because that gives them the courage and the motivation to move forward into some pretty trying times. Help them deal with the stress in their lives and don't create additional stress for them. You can also support them to do a little bit better than they'd be able to do without your coaching. How much does this cost? Well, it actually doesn't cost that much. It costs time and effort to stop and marvel and observe, support, and play with the children and youth in your lives. It's really important because their healthy development depends on their healthy relationship with you. Thank you for starting today.